Tony John in conversation.
My guest today is Mao Lin Liao, someone I've spoken to only once before, a conversation that took place fairly recently, in fact. However, I discovered Mao's work several years ago, a project that grabbed global headlines and set him on the course of being a pioneer in the field of virtual humans. With credits on IMDb as a visual effects artist for feature films and games, Mao has garnered the moniker of the Chinese VFX guru from the Netherlands. He describes himself as a self-motivated, ambitious, and performance-focused entrepreneur. But Mao's earliest appearances on the internet portray a picture of someone more inclined in the arts. I'm hoping today's conversation with this utterly intriguing artist and technologist, or techno-artist, helps me and you better understand this alternative world that is rapidly revealing itself. A world populated by digital versions of humans that may include one day both you and me. A world that Mao spends a lot of time in. So, to get things going, hi Mao.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you for inviting.
My pleasure. I've been, as I just said, I've been super intrigued by your story. And what was most fascinating was that after our conversation, which was very much framed in the world of a tech company, I discovered a human being that was very in touch with an emotional expression of himself through art and drawing, right? And that's the first thing I want to touch on, because what I discovered was that as an artist, I came across the name Khitan.
Mm-hmm.
Am I pronouncing it right?
Well, you did a very good research, because indeed Khitan is one of my internet names that I've been using for all these years.
Okay.
And even have a company prior to that called Khitan Digital.
Who is Khitan?
Well, Khitan is look a bit more into my root, because I'm from Asian and specifically Chinese origin. And in China, there's a Liao dynasty, which is also my last name, Liao. And in Liao dynasty, there's a very interesting tribe called the Khitan warriors. And these are nomadic people that are roaming around Asia, and they are really powerful and really dominate in Asia in that time. So I love that name, and I thought, not to mention that I want to be conquering the Asia, but I really like the sound of it, because it doesn't sound so typical Asian, but also very mysterious.
It does. I must say that's what intrigued me about the name also. Mm-hmm. So is your family line then related to the Khitan tribe in any way?
Well, I figured out the Liao dynasty is not the same. It's the same phonetic writing,
yeah,
but it's not the same family. So
okay.
I'm not descending from that tribe, but I just love the name and sound of it. Yeah.
So, Khitan the artist, how would you describe yourself as an artist?
I would describe myself as you have those people who are in making drawings, and they make really realistic drawings, and that's very technically hard to do things. And I try to do the same thing with my portraits in 3D. And the focus is in human, because it's one of the most difficult things to do in 3D. As a 3D artist, I've seen people doing beautiful visualization of cars, of rooms and product placement, but making human, it's usually the forbidden area.
Oh, why is it forbidden?
Well, because we are so trained to see human in real life. We've seen so many faces. You and me, we've seen 1,000, maybe 100,000 faces in our lifetime. So when you see someone that doesn't make sense, you instantly recognize it, because you have a database. So try to cheat someone and creating something completely new that doesn't exist, it's very hard.
So that's the artist Monica Khitan develops art of humans that are trying to cheat the human brain with that massive database, right? But what made you want to go down that road in the first place?
Well, it was first it was more like a challenge, because I always like to do something.
How old were you when this challenge popped up in your mind?
I think like 30.
Okay.
Yeah. So one day my wife challenged me, "Hey Mao, why you always make those ugly monsters and old men?" I said, "Yeah, that's easy to do, because it's just sculpting and make it very exaggerated. So when you want to make a woman, for example, you have to be subtle, because you cannot go too over wildy with the wrinkles because it looks very old and unattractive. But if you're being too subtle, it looks very artificial. So finding that balance between imperfection and perfect skin, it's very hard.
Well, I want to read you a quote from Kitan. In 2013, I created a portrait of a young woman called Alex. It is without a doubt the most viral image I've ever created. Okay, so I was going to ask, why did you create Alex? What was the impetus or the drive to create Alex?
As I said, it was the challenge between me and my wife to create something that I haven't done before. But then once I created, I found it opened up a whole new world. I didn't know I was capable of creating something like that. And it became my signature and also a series of artwork that I want to create.
So that's the thing. You said it was the most viral image I ever created, right? Mao, can you tell me a bit about where this virality went, where it took you?
So a lot of people saw that she's a real person. They thought this is a photograph. And someone even asked me, hey, what's her phone number? I said, no, I don't have a phone number, but I'm her creator. It went viral because even Playboy picked this up and actually asked me to create the full version, full body, naked, which I politely declined at that time. And but yeah, it was really like a huge, big thumbs up for me to see that even Playboy saw her as a real person and published it in their magazine.
So they published Alex's face. May I ask why you declined to do the full body?
Well, I have a more plans with Alex and to create a virtual influencer or being part of my art series.
Okay.
And I don't want to expose everything before I'm gonna launch my own series.
So Alex, in your mind, Alex has a personality, a voice, a life that she lives, right? And so revealing Alex in totality too early would not serve the purpose that you have for Alex.
Yeah, I would give away a lot of the teaser before even my own launch. So that's why I keep this for myself. And till today, still no one knows exactly who she is or what the story is behind her, which I'm working on right now.
So Mao, I want to ask you this because I can save it for later on, but as we speak now, this question pops up, right? Do you ever get this thought running in your head that it's a bit like playing God? You're creating a human being?
Absolutely. I think there's a huge drive in the human being to create a like person. If you look at history, we start with cave drawings, and then we move into photography, video, and now 3D. I think there's a drive from our human nature to survive or to reproduce. And one way to reproduce is cloning yourself, right? Or making children. But in this case, having a lifelike version of yourself is basically meaning making yourself immortal. And that's meaning passing your genes to the next generation. That's why we always want to create the most realistic version of ourselves. And that is a journey that I discover while I'm doing this. There's a deep desire to create a 100% lifelike person.
Do we all have that desire for 100% lifelike version of ourselves to exist in the world?
I think there is. I mean, there's no doubt there's so many movies cover about robots taking over the world, people making clones of themselves in sci-fi movies. I think that already showed that how much interest we are into having this eternal life.
Yeah. Have you seen the series Altered Carbon?
I haven't seen it fully. I know what it's about.
What it's about, right? So, yeah, there's an interesting premise in that one where your consciousness and memories are stored, but you can replace the skin that you live in, so to speak, right? But it makes me wonder, as you say this, how important it is that people want or people desire that their skin remains forever. So, the visual way they looked, right? And ideally attached to who they were as human beings, their opinions, how they sounded, etc. If the way they looked is something that we somehow want to outlive our physical bodies.
That's a very good question. That's something I've been struggling to find out the question for this as well. It's kind of like the same question if you ask me, who do you want to become in the metaverse? Because we are obviously bound to the physical world. We age. We cannot change with some plastic surgery, we can change our appearance. But in the metaverse, you don't have to be yourself. You can be anyone. Who would you want to be? Would you be the same? Or would you change your face every couple of weeks, just like you're changing your wallpaper. I think that is something we should ask ourselves as well.
Might it be like the novelty of a new thing, right? Whether it's a new phone or a new car, you wait for months when Apple announces the latest upgrades on their next version of the phone, right? And they build up anticipation, and then it comes, you get it, and you're excited, and then one day later it's just a phone again, right? And I think it happens with a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether, and going back to the phone, eventually you end up just wanting it to do what you use it most for, whether it's reading your emails or making a call or sending messages. Eventually it ends up being serving that purpose, right? Or those purposes. And all the fancy stuff, the extra camera, etc., it's all great, but the novelty wears out. And I'm thinking with the metaverse, if we can be anything we want to be, would it also, you think, and this is an opinion I'm asking, eventually us just wanting to be ourselves in the metaverse? Because the novelty of changing.
I have thought about this as well, and I believe that that if everyone is perfect in this metaverse, I think suddenly people would want to be not so perfect, to stand out. Because if everyone has perfect teeth, perfect eyes, and then people will think about more original appearance to stand out after the crowd. So I think we start to see more weird combination of people, but also things that I haven't discovered, revealed, is that the possibility of mixing yourself with your partner. For example, if we know your partner's face and your face, we can actually pre-generate your children portraits.
Wow.
And imagine that you're dating each other and you both have your avatar.
Yeah.
We can do hey, let's see how our children look like. And then you can basically wear your children mask or avatar for a while. Say, this could be my children, There's a lot of things that we haven't even thought about that can be happening when you actually can visualize yourself, your partner, and that's something that I'm really excited about.
But this point you're raising kind of like also, I think, has room to be tied into biology. Yeah? When you create a child, when two individuals create a child, right? How does a child pick up some features of one parent and the other, and other features of another parent, right? So there's room actually to integrate this into the field of...
Absolutely. That is a specific... I'm not an expert in biology or any mean, but I strongly believe that with our DNA, we can reconstruct our face. Imagine one day with your DNA, I can predict your face. I can solve cases, but also see how you age one day. Because I think some of the biometric data in DNA that definitely tell what kind of skin tone you have, color, ethnicity. We could create a rough estimate, but of course there's external factor like how you grew up and which environment you grew up would change your appearance even more. But that is something I'm really curious about, how that will evolve. So
this would be tied into mapping the human genome, for example. All the data that you derive from that you can use to predict.
I see a lot of people using genome data to predict diseases, which is very useful. But how about mapping the facial feature? Of course, that's a bit of privacy. But imagine if I have your fingerprint and I know how you look like. That's very interesting for police.
This is like Philip K. Dick's Minority Report, right? Where
it's Minority Report, what we're talking about now.
Yeah. And you're fascinated with this?
I'm always fascinated with things that you can do with,
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned in the metaverse one day, being perfect would become a problem, and people want to be imperfect, right? So this ties into something else you did as Kitan the artist, which is the Perfect Imperfections project that eventually found a place at Museum Haarlem, if I'm not mistaken, right? It was an exhibition there, right?
Exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit about Perfect Imperfections?
So it's Perfect Imperfection is my journey into discovering how we should look like in the virtual spaces. And I found that the more perfect you look like, the less believable it is. So it's all about the imperfection, like the wrinkles, the pimples, and the scars that we have in our face that make you different from someone else. But also to distinct your twin. If you have a twin brother, you look identical. But it's really the journey that creates your character. And that was really something that I like to explore. And some people even ask me, Mao, why don't you just take a picture, right? Then I say, yes, but the goal of Perfect Imperfection is also to show the duality of being a human. because we can only see ourselves as one gender, like male or female. But how would a female version of you look like? You never know, because you don't, unless you have a twin sister or brother. But then that's still not you. That's someone else, because you're not identical. So I try to. The reason also why I create this perfect imperfection, and with the name that all the human that I make, or the avatars, have unisex names.
Yeah.
Alex could be both male and female.
Correct.
Evan could be the same. And the same for all the other females that I create. They're all unisex names, because I want to show the different side of it as well in the second exhibition.
When is the second exhibition?
Well,
Do you?
I have no idea. That's still work in progress. So until I'm happy with that, but I think hopefully soon. Yeah.
So the second exhibition will be Alex as a male now.
Yes.
Have I ever wondered about how I might look as a female? I think that question has popped up in one conversation or another. And I remember when my wife was pregnant, right? Mm-hmm. We wondered so much. We had so many conversations about how our son might look, or how it turned out to be our son. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, the human being is always curious about what could be, right? And you want to explore and play in the area that shows me what I could be, and that B can be anything. Another gender, another species. Mm-hmm. It can be anything, right? But you want to focus on the human element.
Exactly. And I recently watched a movie called Everything and Everywhere All at Once.
Michelle Yeoh's in that.
Yeoh.
Yeah.
Not because I'm a big fan of her, but the movie is very interesting. And it's kind of like, I have this idea as well as what if. Yeah. What if I wasn't here in Holland? How would my life would be? Because originally I'm from China, and because of some dramatic event in my life, I couldn't. I have to move here. But I just always wondering, like, what happened if I stayed in China? Would I still do the same thing? Would I be still talking to you today? Most probably not. But these are the things that haunt me every day.
I like the fact that you're seeking answers, right? Because I think we spend a lot of time and invest a lot of energy in these thoughts. I'm speaking for myself here, and I'm going to confess that I do, because I think it's human nature, the what if scenarios, right? And sometimes it goes into regret, which I think is a bit unhealthy to constantly live with regret. But other times it's exciting stuff. Again, what if our child really was between you and me, right? Mm-hmm. How would that look, right? Mm-hmm. What if I could exist as another sex? How would I look? So there are many intriguing what if scenarios, but very often they remain in the realm of our imagination. Mm-hmm. I really find it interesting that there might be a way one day we could, when a question like that pops up, like we do with Google, go in, input some data, and then get a possible answer to the what if, right?
Well, that's same like what the movie I was talking about. It shows the also possibility of your life. If you take a certain decision, you become this. And I think what my takeaway from the movie is you could be anyone, anywhere. If you make now it makes sense why I'm here today, because I'm connecting all the dots, all the stupid and good decision I made in my past life. But it doesn't make sense at that moment. But now it makes sense.
Because you're here now.
I'm here right now. So, it's kind of like embrace life. That's my motto, Don't doubt about what you're doing. There's always things happen for a reason. So.
And the premise of the movie, right, is that you have all these multiple lifelines, right? But they exist, if you remove the element of time, they are existing simultaneously, right? So, yes. Etc. Do you think it's possible that one day we can observe? And if it's possible, who's observing?
Wow, that's a very hard question. I think there are already companies working on something like that. I think powerful companies like Google and Nvidia, I'm sure they're doing something similar, but that not on the consumer level, but more, for example, on the enterprise level. Because what they are doing is basically creating simulation for companies to save costs. So they try to simulate a whole assembling line for cars, for example. And then they figure out the perfect configuration, but instead of hiring the people and to do the work and see how that goes. They use virtual humans, virtual machines, everything running like the Matrix, and see what's the outcome of that. So in certain point, people are already doing that, but not in for consumer, but more on a high level enterprise solution.
So that's where I think this conversation with you I find very intriguing, right? Because a lot of companies are involved in things where there's efficiency related to maybe higher profits or higher productivity, whatever it could be, right? But it feels like the area your mind wanders in is about the human experience. It's about the alternatives related to what my experience as a human being could be.
Yeah, I think everything what the human touch, feels, sense, and all the senses will be something that I would love to work on. I have an idea to make the perfect representation of you digitally. Require 4 layers. You need the exterior, the skin, the appearance.
Yeah.
We need the voice, we need the brain, and we need the movement. Because imagine, so if everything works, but you still move like a robot, that's kind of doesn't work for me. So it requires a person that knows all this, to be expert in all this area. But that's very hard to find, one expert. But it also means that if you create a digital human that doesn't behave or look or talk like one, it will fall. The whole credibility that I believe this is a person I'm talking to, the whole Turing test will fail.
So I've heard, please correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not in the industry or entrenched in it, but I've heard that with machine learning and AI, right? Today it's almost like with 30 minutes of voice recordings, they can replicate the voice, speech pattern, cadence of how someone speaks, etc. And with video footage, it's a bit more maybe, but it's possible to replicate how someone walks, their body language when they talk, etc. Is that true?
That's certainly true at the moment. It's really reaching a moment that nothing's impossible almost. But what is still missing is that we want to see this happening in what we call real time, like what I want now. But a lot of things that like with deepfake and machine learning, it's been processed. So there's a lot of hours being processed before, and you have to wait a couple of hours before you get the output. So of course, the movies and the video clip you see on the internet is amazing, but it's all processed beforehand. So we're still not be able to do this in what we call real time, like instantly.
Okay, real time takes me to how I discovered you.
Yes.
So, how I discovered you before I knew it was you. Let me put it that way, because many years ago, I think it was over 5 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
I heard this about. I read an article on BBC News about a project that was a kind of sting operation to fish out pedophiles.
Absolutely.
And it used a child based in the Philippines, a girl called Sweetie.
Yes.
And she was in chat rooms, and she basically was used as bait to identify pedophiles. And then these pedophiles were arrested, and I read it was a super successful operation that had the Interpol involved and all, a bunch of law enforcement agencies, etc., and organizations. But what was startling about the article was that Sweetie didn't exist in the real world. She was a simulation. And yet, in those chats and video chats, the pedophiles actually believed her to be a real child living in the Philippines, right? So that goes to what you just said, right? It's real-time simulation, right? Because I can imagine in the chat room, Sweetie was responding to things, but the interval between a question asked and the response was short, correct?
So that was a life-changing project, I have to say. Not only just before I answer your question.
No, it's great that you do. Actually, that was what I wanted to find out, the backstory of it.
The backstory is very interesting because we couldn't talk about this for 6 months, even after that. So because we don't know the consequence and the backlash, what happens after we announced this project. So the entire crew was kind of like, we have to lay low a bit. And then we found out what it's really about, because even from the organization point of view, we were not able to uncover a lot about what exactly this is for, because maybe it will just maybe if we leak it, it will cause damage. So even I couldn't tell my wife what I'm working on. So that's very interesting. And then
For 6 months,
for 6
even
months.
after the project began.
Yeah, we couldn't tell anyone what we're
So
doing.
Sweetie was live,
Yeah.
and 6 months after she went live,
Yeah.
in chats,
Yeah.
etc., no one spoke of it.
No
in the
spoke
first.
about it. Yeah, and even after when we finally come out about this project and the people who work on it, the operators who, because this is of course not completely computer driven. It has still needs some manual operators that chat with these pedophiles. So imagine what go through their mind. You know what kind of painful process that was. It took them also like a couple of months of, how do you say, mentally detoxing themselves.
Because it can cause PTSD, right? I can imagine when you hear what happens.
They hire some psychologists to talk to these guys, and I have really a lot of respect for these people who they got messed up pretty badly.
But Mao, I must assume that they were fully aware of this potential risk going into the project, right?
I'm sure they're aware of that. And
how did you come about to be involved in the project?
So I was, of course, not directly in contact. I was working indirectly for the agent. But it was for me also super challenging to do this, because this is something I haven't done before. And that's always why I liked about my work. Every time people come to me, there's a new challenge. And this is something absolutely I haven't done before. But we could get away easier, because this is a project done more than 10 years ago. And the technology was not so advanced like what we have these days with machine learning. So, and what also was kind of help is that she was a little bit more like a webcam girl. So you don't see the footage like being super sharp. So it looks a bit muffled away.
So the deficiencies of bandwidth, etc., of quality of lenses allowed a lot more room for artificialness, to use a different...
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. What exactly did you do for that project?
I helped them design the face of the girl, how she should look like, the background, and the motion, because we have to also motion capture a real person, and the person is not a child, obviously.
Yeah.
That we capture, and of course to translate a grown-up person into a child requires some modification, understanding how the physics works of a child. So that was really interesting to figure out.
Mao, going back to the potential trauma suffered by the operators, right, who were chatting, etc. Did you know from the start when you got involved what the project was for, what it was about?
Not 100%, because if I knew what this vaguely what it's about, but they didn't tell us the whole story. So,
because I'm just wondering what the brief is, right? Because it can, I think I would get messed up in my head, right? If the brief was, we've got to create a child that is as appealing as possible to a pedophile, right? Mm-hmm. Just the idea that I have to design something now to attract someone who's suffering from a mental disease that makes children sexually appealing, right? Yeah. I can imagine that would mess me up tremendously, you know? Did you know what it was for when you were designing Sweetie?
Well, we knew it was for an NGO, so we know that it's not going to be used in a bad way.
Yeah.
So that's I have to make sure. But then the designing, there was not a intention to design her to make her look sexually appealing for this pedophile. It just need to look like a normal person,
a normal child,
and that's what is also happening in that side of the world, in Philippines. It was really normal kids that are doing this kind of crazy thing. So I for me, when I finish a project, and I'm now father of 2 young girls, I'm so happy that I did this, because it makes them it makes me feel like I contribute something meaningful to the world.
Mao, I can tell you did. When I hear the number of individuals that were identified because of this project, right? Mm-hmm. Very rarely do you come across something that, no matter what your opinion is, no matter what your politics are, your culture is, you'd say, okay, this is a good thing in the world that happened,
Absolutely.
And to think that it involved technology, it involved people who are willing to put themselves and their mental and emotional health on the line, right? It's a beautiful story. And I think I'm so happy we're talking about this today, because I think more people should hear about the story as an example of how technology can be put to amazingly good use.
Absolutely. That is actually, after that moment, it really changed my life. Also how I think about that CGI or my field of work is not just for entertainment. You can actually turn it into something good. And that's also how I get the idea to start my new startup, which I talked to you about last time. That it's more about promoting the white mirror instead of the black mirror, which is the dystopian world that we all know that technology is used in a bad way. And I'm more about the white mirror.
Okay, so Sweetie helped you realize that there is a white mirror, right? And you're right, because so as a fan of Black Mirror, which I am, I think Charlie Brooker's perspective of where technology can go, right? As scary as it is, and of course, there's the shock value, and that's what makes something, watchable, etc. But also, it, I think, presents a very interesting one-sided argument. But in everything in life, there's a counterbalance on the other side, right? So maybe that's kind of like a grid or guideline to what could be,
Well, maybe Netflix should make a White Mirror series. That's,
and maybe you should get involved in
maybe
that.
I should get involved in that, and I'll give them some ideas.
Speaking of that, going off tangent completely, I know you worked with Jackie Chan. And coming from Asia myself, I'm a huge fan of this man, the hardest working man in show business, I think. And the man with the most broken bones in show business also. Yeah. So you worked with Jackie Chan on a movie, right?
Yes. There was a movie called Around the World in 80 Days.
Yes.
And was for Disney. And it's not like the typical Jackie Chan movie, it has a bit more maybe a Western touch. But then she was playing the, what's it called? Not the main guy, the sidekick.
Phineas Ferb and what's his name? Tenzin, no, not Tenzin, I'm thinking of someone else, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, he's playing his sidekick, so... but yeah, of course, working with Jackie is amazing. Although I wasn't not on the set with him, working all the time. It was more, we're doing the things afterwards.
Yeah.
But what really makes me happy about this is that I got a chance to meet him in real life in Los Angeles during the premiere. We had some dinner, we had some party, and and Jackie was a party animal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't expect that, but I know he's physically very fit and amazing artist. But seeing how he dances, just as creative as his fights.
And with almost all of Jackie Chan's movies, right? And I think the world really saw this with Rush Hour. Is that the one he did with Chris Tucker? You see the outtakes, right?
Yeah.
And every time you see the outtakes, it feels like Jackie Chan is like that in real life. Is that what you experience as well?
Absolutely. He's how you say, his halo when he's come in the room. I remember the day when we had dinner with him. He brought his own Jackie Chan wine. There's no label. It's like red wrapped Jackie Chan wine. So wow, I know he's a big fan of wine, but then instantly everyone was pleased and happy to see him. He was really like entertaining everyone in the room. Yeah, this man is my idol. I love him.
Yeah, it's nice to hear stories like this. You often hear about how these celebrities are like prima donnas, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of feeling I got every time I saw an outtake that he is that person in life, and I'm glad you've confirmed it.
Yeah.
So what did you do exactly? Did you replicate Jackie Chan in terms of a synthetic version of him?
No, at that time I was more working as a artist on the transition from the movies. So sometimes he go from Europe to Turkey. Okay. There's a transition, so it has nothing to do with what I'm doing these days.
Okay, so not the human element in the movie.
No, that's basically my movie career. That I was working on completely different things. I tend to do completely different things every 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So
tell me about the gaming side, the gaming world, because you were also involved in the development of a game, right? Killzone, I think it was. Yeah,
Killzone was the main game I worked on in the past for Sony, Guerrilla Games. But I also got a chance to work a little bit on the new franchise called Horizon in the early stage when they are really start to experimenting with models. So I got a chance to work there as well, and it was one big happy family. Working with Sony was amazing journey, and I learned a lot from them.
And what did you do exactly for the game?
So I was we call it in our field a character artist, which means we are creating avatars for games, and there's a special department just take care of the visual appearance, but also make sure that they move and talk like real.
So I'm curious about this, Mao. In the gaming world, right? What are you as a character developer, let's say, right, for a game or a series of characters or a single character? What are you looking for? And let me tell you what I'm thinking about. I've often watched interviews with actors, right, who have a role. I mean, typically a Robert De Niro, these method actors, right? They really want to find out everything about the character, and they start creating traits, idiosyncrasies about the character as well, and then they live it, they become it, right? What do you do when you have to develop a character for a game? Are you looking at as many different perspectives as well?
It's funny that you say that, because some of my colleagues saying that artists like us who work on animation movies are actually real actors as well, but they cannot express themselves with a face or through speech. But what we're really good at is expressing ourselves through art. So we always put something of ourselves into our character.
Okay.
So when I create a character for Killzone, maybe I'll add a bit my Asian touch to it. Maybe it won't be visible, but there's something you might pick up. And that's something also I found really funny when I was creating my first 3D portrait. I create a girl, but then I give her Asian eyes. So, but because I'm so used to look at myself in the mirror, so I give her Asian eyes, but I didn't found it unnatural. But then I realized that I'm actually using my self-image and projecting that into another person without realizing that.
And do you think that exists in all the characters you've created?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also see it work from colleagues as well. You can see their personal touch. I can say if a person is more from a different area of the world, they will more likely to put some traits of themselves in there. And I can see the style, what we call style, which is actually more the personal touch. Yeah.
Okay, and these are real photorealistic, almost, or human realistic characters that are being created, right? I guess that's where the gaming world is going to, but also with the artists, right, who are doing a similar exercise to what you do in your art, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to make it as human as possible, that it fools the human eye almost, right?
Yeah.
And yet you're saying you can tell from looking at a character who the artist might be, the way you can tell looking at a painting that this is a Rembrandt, this is a Van Gogh. Yeah. Is it that distinctive?
Yeah, there's a certain signature, especially in the eyes. Because when I look at you, 90% look at your eyes, and
correct,
then the mouth. These are some scientific tests that people are looking most at the eyes. So I put a lot of attention into the eyes, but I see also artists doing that. And then when one big mistake I see a lot with artists is they putting the iris a little bit higher position than how it naturally should be. When I look at your eyes, your iris can remain in this frame of your upper and lower eyelid.
Yeah.
It's also within that, unless you look up like that. But I see a lot of artists making the mistake of not doing that, and then that's something I pick up a lot.
So when you see that mistake, automatically it feels less real to you.
Yeah, it instantly put me off. Yeah.
Okay.
And I can write a book about all these small things that people are doing.
And would you want to share this with artists out there who are creating?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm really interesting to write a book about this. And how which are the things that people don't think about. For example, the color of your teeth. What kind of tint should it be? If I make it too yellow, it looks really like a chain smoker. Yeah. If I make it too white, like a shirt, it looks artificial. So finding the balance between yellow, how organic and how off-white it is, it's not that easy to explain. Yeah.
Hey, Mao, so I'm really this is where for me it gets very intriguing, right? Which is there's an idea in your head. Let's say it ends up being Alex, right? It starts off as an idea, and that idea takes form, right? Takes features, takes tones, and the cheekbones start ending up, in a certain height or whatever it could be, right? Are elements like the color of Alex's teeth already something preset in your mind, or as things develop, you start seeing that this would be the most natural way her teeth would look?
I think there's just like Frankenstein, I made thousands of revisions that doesn't look great,
Really?
Yeah, I didn't make Alex from day one. I knew what I was doing. I actually have to experiment a lot, just like a product. I have to maybe first I make a brunette, maybe make it with different hair color, different eye color, and then I found out, okay, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And what's also hard to be an artist is to correct yourself, right? Because you're so deep and diving into your own work that you're forgetting this whole world around you. You work in a tunnel vision. So one trick I always use is a mirror. I always have a mirror behind me, and not to look at myself, but if I look back, I can see my image of my work in the mirror, in a mirrored way. So by looking at the mirror image, I instantly reset the image. I can see the things that I didn't see, because if you're staring too long at your work, you don't see the problem.
So interesting. I have a friend who's got a company, and what they do is they take the top level people in organizations, normally large organizations. They take like the top 10 people on a trip, right? And it's fascinating because large companies always have workshops and seminars. They always have experts coming in, consultants to train, etc. This friend of mine, his company is doing the same thing, but what they do is they take them out of their comfort zone and put them in a totally alien place. So they're given they each download an app. Everyone in the 10 people download an app, and on that app they get a prompt. They know that from day 1 to day 10 they have to block their agendas because that's the training. And day -1 before they leave, they get in the app they get a prompt that says, pack a bag with these things and come to Schiphol tomorrow morning at this time, right? And to cut a long story short, he says the effectiveness of what they do is to get people out of their usual pattern of behavior so they can see things from a different perspective. It sounds to me that the mirror that you use does the same thing. You're seeing something you're staring at just from a different perspective, and that one moment in the mirror.
That is, that's exactly what you're describing. Is also how I approach my work. I try to not be biased, basically, because I think, because I make this work, I must be good. No, I try to judge myself, and sometimes it's really hard to confront yourself what you're doing and to ask for honest opinion. You know? Of course, if you ask a friend, hey, does it look good? Yeah, it looks good. But does it really look good? Or is it because you think?
It's hard to get a critical, honest answer from people.
And sometimes the best people to ask is just, for example, my wife or people who have no idea what you're doing. Ask for, hey, what do you think of this?
Yeah, children are brutally honest. And that's why it's very interesting to have focus groups with kids, who give feedback. So going back to the creation of Alex, right? So your objective was to create a perfectly imperfect...
A believable person, actually.
A believable person. Yeah. So that's a nice term, a believable person, right? So that kind of sounds like an activity with a finish line, like a race, right? You start from here, where it's totally unbelievable, and when you cross the finish line, you've created something believable. But I'm curious now, have you ever looked back at all your other versions of Alex that were rejected by you, right? Have you looked back and have you ever looked back at them firstly?
Long time ago.
A long time ago.
I have to say. Actually, that's a good question you're asking, because I do save every iteration. So every day I make a blog post for myself.
Okay.
Like a vlog, and then I see, okay, what I've done here, and then I look back as 5 revision. Oh, maybe at that point I make a really stupid call and change this. But I found the journey to be more interesting than the final result. I think that what I learned from those, it took me more than a month to create Alex. Not because it took so long to create the human, but it's more the discovery, the journey about how to create a new person that doesn't exist, but still really recognizable. Yeah, that is amazing.
So that's where my thought process is straying to right now, which is, I wonder if today we did an exercise where you could look back at iterations of Alex, right? Whether one of those iterations to you might be so necessary to exist in the world today, whereas that iteration wasn't appropriate at that time. You know what I mean? At that time, it was rejected, that iteration. Yeah. I wonder if you look back at all the iterations, you might find iterations that today you might say, actually, that Alex is also very interesting.
Yeah. Well, the most interesting is that, of course, as you said, I put some of my thoughts in there, and one of the things I've been testing with my audience when I show them this picture, how do you recognize someone in Alex? Does she remind you of someone? And it's funny that when I ask a Dutch person, they always say Chantal Jansen, which is a Dutch celebrity.
Yes.
And the funny is that I did use her hairstyle, but not her face. But still, people would say this is Chantal Jansen. So there's nothing of her face that looks like her. But then, if I'm asking an American audience or people from outside Holland, they say Emma Stone. And at that time, Emma Stone was not even a celebrity. But it's funny that people are, based on the reference where they come from, have a different idea about.
That's exactly it, because that's where I was wondering if an iteration of Alex might have a place, because I also think as an artist yourself, right, you have changed over the years when you started creating her, and the culture around you has changed, the world has changed. There was I forget who it was, there was this psychologist who had this very interesting statement. You can never swim in the same river twice, because between the first time and the second time, both you have changed and the river has changed. So it can never be the same experience twice, right? So thinking of that, I wonder if you look back today, because of all the changes in you and the world around you, if an iteration of Alex might suddenly be fitting in, for whatever reason. And that's why I think if it's a finishing line kind of thing about the most believable version, right? Then maybe it's a finishing line. Something earlier was not believable enough, right?
Yeah. Although when you say believable, there's two kind of belief credibility. I mean, when you talk about a picture, then I call photorealism, and that's something we can perfectly achieve these days. But when you talk about a moving, a talking person, make that believable and credible. That is a different ball game. And that's why I'm mostly focused on that now. When you say, where's the end game?
Yeah.
That's the next level that I'm looking for. How can I make this Alex come alive? Look at you, talk to you, and have something sensible to say. That's something that I'm really, that's what I'm dedicating the rest of my life now working on. Okay.
And speaking of that, I want to get to your company, Reblika. Am I saying it correct?
Yes, Reblika.
Reblika. It's somewhere in the literature of Reblika. I think maybe on the website or maybe in an interview with you, it was stated. Reblika's ambition is to become the world's #1 character company and crossing the uncanny valley by 2025. I think earlier we touched upon this a little bit. Can you please explain the uncanny valley?
Well, the easy way to explain uncanny valley is like how you experience something called this uncomfortable feeling when you go to the wax museum. Because when you look at the wax museum, they're all looking perfectly realistic statue of human. But there's something uncomfortable because they're missing something. Maybe a soul, maybe a human touch. And the lack of soul, of human touch, is give you this creepy feeling when you're around a synthetic human that looks like one but doesn't behave like one. And that is exactly what I try to find out. What make you believe this is a human? The whole Turing test. That's what I'm trying to explore and find out with my company. Yeah.
Okay. What does it mean to cross the uncanny valley? We're completely comfortable with something that doesn't exist in the flesh and blood world? We don't have that feeling of nervousness when we see it? Is that crossing the uncanny valley?
Yeah, I think it's mostly a feeling, because I can, for example, make you look like a cartoon or stylized character, and people are perfectly comfortable talking to you because they accept that you are not a human being. But what's the thin line between 100% realistic or not so realistic? That line is very blurred, and very gray. For me to discover that it's very important, because I think there's a lot of use case when you have a believable person. Right now we don't accept it because it's just so far away, so sci-fi, so Terminator, so Black Mirror. And I wonder if we really could create a believable, trustworthy person. How can we make the world a better place?
So that's, for me, very fascinating. Challenge 1 is crossing the uncanny valley, right? So you don't have that feeling of discomfort, right? So there's a soul. You feel that there's a soul. Okay. let's assume, hypothetically, you've crossed the uncanny valley, right, Mao? What are the applications that could make the world a better place?
Well, doing the one very personal thing I want to say is my grandma passed away 3 years ago, and she was really lonely. She was suffering from dementia, and having a normal person to have conversation with her is very tiresome because she keep repeating the same thing, and and imagine if there is a person that looks like my mom, or just like person to talk with, that challenge her, help her remember things, that would be amazing. That's kind of like the thing that I want to I want to do something about this. This is touching me on a personal level, and I think if we have this kind of technology, it can be used in so many ways, helping people with psychological problem, but also maybe helping them facing themselves. Look, some people are maybe not happy with their body. They make some enhancements, and how would that look like, and maybe just for those kind of things, I see a lot of use case.
So firstly, about your grandmother's situation, that is beautiful. It's really beautiful because I think the world, especially the Western world, is suffering an epidemic of loneliness, and it's mostly afflicting the older people, the seniors amongst us, right? And I think that's just an amazing application of it. Can you give me another example? So the body image thing you touched upon, how people see themselves, right?
Yeah, the self-reflection is also maybe being able to see myself gaining weight or losing weight. For example, people with anorexia, they still thinking that they are really fat, or but imagine if we can show them the themselves as an avatar, increasing or decreasing weight, how that affects them. So being able to visualize yourself, it's very important. It can alter your decision, and what kind of decision you make. I think it can really change people's life forever.
Yeah, there's a very cliche expression. I think it goes, if you can see it, you can be it, right? Or do it, or believe it, right? And it's true that the sense of sight has a massive impact on ourselves.
But I also see, for example, sometimes there's a project, a VR project, where a mother was just recently lost her child, and the child was recreated in CGI. That was like tear-picking, like moment to see how the mother was able to see her child one more time.
So, a mother who loses a child, that's possibly the most traumatic thing ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it causes a lot of pain, distress, trauma as well, for sure, right? Did that project test what aspects of the impact of losing a child were lessened or addressed by the creation of
I haven't sort of read the full report what this is about, but I was one of the use case. And of course, personally, I don't think this is the good way to use it. It's actually bad, for example, because I do think people need to accept, the faith and what's happening around them. If you keep lingering with this and not can go over this painful unfortunate event in your life, you have post-traumatic distress as well. Yeah. So I don't think it's a good use case, but it does show that what is possible. Yeah.
Interesting. I read that death gives life meaning. If everyone could live forever, right? Then what? There's a discussion going on about what would be the meaning of life then, right?
True.
And I tend to agree with what you just said.
We're going really into philosophical area right now, and I think that's. I also don't have answer for everything. I do see that a lot of this require more deepful, meaningful thinking about what kind of technology are we doing right now? How would that impact the world? But for me, it's more like let's start a conversation right now, and before it's too late, and let's discover the good things.
But Mao, I think that's what I'm most interested in exploring with you, right? Mm-hmm. Because to the outside world, you're in you're in technology, you're in AI, you have a lot of terms today, right? That are buzzwords, and you happen to be involved in all of them. Huh? The metaverse, AI, synthetic humans, virtual landscapes,
Yeah.
people, etc. And at the same time, I'm feeling more and more as we talk that everything you're doing is driven from very human reasons.
Absolutely. I have a, I even have a point when I started my company before I called Reblika. I have a name in my mind, and the name is not Reblika. It was We Make Human, because obviously we cannot make human, but it will start the conversation. What are you doing? You make human? Just to spark that idea of how kind of a complete different area. And I think in order for people to trust companies like us, we need to show good things. I don't think the metaverse belongs to big corporate companies that own your data, and that's with my company. We're moving the other way. We want to give governance and to the people about their own data, their own virtual identity. And I think in order to do that, you need to create a lot of trust, because right now there's a lot of trust issue with these virtual beings or either being a. And I think that's why I'm here to talk about this kind of problem. We were working on the trust issue.
So there's been a lot of pushback from governments, from the financial systems, etc., about this decentralized sovereignty, right, of people in the metaverse, right? So I want to play devil's advocate here. I want you to play devil's advocate for your own idea, right? What would be the potential dangers of virtual or artificial humans, a virtual version of myself in the metaverse, right, having full sovereignty over that identity of mine?
I think theft of your identity is one of the things that people are asking. Imagine if I can use your identity and to do something, to pledge a crime or do something badly. That's the most case that I'm most worried about. The security is a very big issue, and how we're gonna solve that problem is also something that I don't have answer at the moment, because I'm not a security expert as well. But that's something that's the biggest issue I think right now. Security.
Okay. But in the real world, identity theft happens, right? And in the real world, or in the non-virtual world, you have companies specialize in identity security popping up, right? So wouldn't it be the case that eventually for the metaverse as well, for Web3 or whatever it is, they're going to be specialists in security of what's the term? Is it virtual identities? Is it?
Virtual identity, yeah. I mean, there's virtual identity, virtual passport, you can call it. But indeed, that's why I think that if you couple this with the biometric data, you will exactly have that, right to say this is me. Because right now, based on what's the identity, based on which company who say this is your identity.
Correct.
But if you have found a way that is fair and also verifiable through biometric data, then you don't have this issue.
So you said earlier that you don't want to be like some of the megacorps today that own all the data and decide what to do with the data, right? You want people to be able to own their own data, so to speak, right?
Yes.
And you say that one of the ways to deal with security might be to couple it with biometric data, right? So a biometric data means a combination of me and my physical characteristics combined with my virtual identity and characteristics, right?
Exactly.
So one without the other, it's like two-step authentication.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like we call this nice physical and digital identity.
Okay, and then let's say that's a reality. It's plausible, right? Now there's this two-level authentication process that ensures that my virtual identity is really mine, right, in the world. What do you think some of the applications and experiences what kind of applications or experiences could be created from that?
Well, one thing that also drives me is to solve a problem around fashion, because in fashion there's a lot of return rate of e-commerce. So, for example, if you go out and buy a shirt and it doesn't fit you, 50% of the order are returned, and that causes a lot of issues for fashion brands. It's a big cost. So imagine if we use this biometric data and your avatar that has your measurement, exactly your size. Imagine you can try out virtual garment, virtual clothing with the right size. You don't have to return because you know exactly how it looks and fits, and that could contribute to less traffic and less pollution, and make fashion a bit more, how to say, eco-friendly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's one application, and I guess the fashion segment is one of your client bases, right? You have companies in fashion that are interested in using your technology.
Yes,
or
yes.
Reblika.
Yeah, we already work with a lot of fashion brands and to help them. For example, during the COVID time, some brand couldn't do the typical runway show, so we create runway show and the metaverse for them. But we also help them, for example, scanning, digitizing their garments and move that also into the digital space. But also brands who want more diversity. For example, when we talk about fashion models, it's maybe very hard to create a inclusive collection with enough diversity. And with our digital human, that's very easy.
Okay, yeah. So that's fascinating. You can present your collection with every shape, size, skin tone, cultural characteristic or ethnic characteristic that you want, right?
Exactly.
Going back to the earlier thing about the sustainability impact, right, of this. There's one part which is scanning the clothes, etc., to understand how they would fit a body. What do you think is needed in the world of the consumer in order for you to replicate your body? Would it just be tape measurements on different parts? Would that be sufficient, or will one day would we have scanners at home scanning ourselves so an accurate representation of our physique is also
both? I think about both idea could be the start of it, but it's not accurate because
the measurements, the old school putting a tape around.
And also no consumer will want to do that, to measure themselves in detail. That's too much work. The easiest way is to basically use something called, I think, computer vision that can estimate your body accurately by just using a camera.
Really?
Yeah.
So you stick your iPhone in front of you.
There's already research done in this field that allow people just create an estimate of your body based on single picture, even dressed like yourself. You don't have to be naked. That's already possible. It's just that it's not so 100%, 99% accurate. Maybe it's 85% accurate, and maybe that 85% will be enough for now. Because also another problem with fashion is that in terms of digital standard for garment, there's no standard. Everyone does it own way, different way. So if we're talking about digitization of garments or creating something called fashion on demand, which also helps to reduce the overproduction, it's very hard because there's no standard these days.
Okay, I want to dive into that because the fashion on demand, right? I find this really fascinating. A long time ago, I discovered how Toyota has structured its assembly lines, right? It brought all its suppliers on that one, I think it's a Shinkansen line or whatever, and they don't produce cars, standard cars. Every time an order comes in from anywhere in the world, they start assembling the car on that line based on the specs that the buyer wants. I want this upgraded hi-fi system or sound system. I want alloy rims on the wheels, whatever it is. So nothing is pre-made. Everything is made upon order, right? And the article I read spoke of the efficiency of Toyota. Every car has found its customer already, right? So there's no car lying in a warehouse somewhere, collecting dust. Fashion industries, it feels like it's the other end of the spectrum, where you have stacks of clothes, sales, getting rid of stuff that they cannot sell anymore because the old structure is fixed, minimum order quantities, and the more colors you have of a model, the more, you're going to have items sitting on shelves again.
Yeah.
What is needed? Let's talk about the fashion industry. What is needed for that step into fashion on demand to take place?
Well, as the name suggests, we have something called old-fashioned. That's because fashion is just, they think if it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? And they're still making money. But I think the problem is it's not sustainable, as we all know. How we're working with overproduction and fashion on demand is the key. But the problem is, how can we come together and make a standard for all these fashion production, digital, especially the move to digital is the biggest problem. And there are already maybe small percentages of the current fashion industry embracing digital, but that is still more in the visualization phase and not in actual production.
That's what I want to ask you. What does this mean, this move to digital? What would a fashion company that truly moves to digital, what would they be doing? What would they look like? How would you describe that company?
I mean, the start, you need to have create a library of the materials. For example, leather, denim. Everything should be physically as digitally exactly the same. Because if you design something digitally and it doesn't behave or drape the same way as in the physical world, it will not match. So you need to create a identical copy in the digital world. And once you have that blueprint, you need to take that into production. So that is also something that a lot of people are exploring right now. How can you take digital into an upsampling line, like what you said in Toyota?
So I want to ask you something about that. You said everything they have, every material they have to have a digital copy of it, right? So again, it's not just about how it looks. It can look exactly the same, but the digital copy also understands how it moves, how it drapes, how when you have it in the shape of a shirt, it's going to behave, right?
Exactly.
That sounds very complicated.
It's not that complicated as it sounds. Maybe for me as a technical person. For right now, I see even a company doing something like making a material library. For example, a wool is thicker than maybe your shirt, and just having the library that match with their own assembling line, that's already a huge business. But then applying that and indeed and making it fashion on demand is not technically impossible. I know a lot of startup that is busy doing this kind of work, but there's just not like in the in the more enterprise world, there's like people come together and say, hey, let's do things together. Everyone tried to find their own solution, just like the metaverse. Everyone's created their own metaverse. There's not a single metaverse that we can plug into. And true interoperability is the key, but also the problem right now with fashion.
So they're not playing well together. Everyone wants to be the star in whatever they're doing. Would it be reasonable to assume that one day the fabric production companies, right, that are creating these looms of fabric, right, they would be making for every fabric they create, they will be making a digital version of it? Because it changes, right? I mean, there's on the surface level, there's wool versus cotton versus linen, but within wool, there's the weight of the thread and how heavy the wool is, how it's woven together. So eventually, it'll be each supplier being part of the digital process, right?
Exactly. That be validated. The material should behave the same as the other wool from the other vendor.
Yeah.
So there need to be standard creation in every aspect. Otherwise, it won't work. Because how can you say that you're even within the physical world, the quality is different between your shirt and that wool or that cashmere wool with that whatever wool is also different. So it's very hard to standardize that because it's based on physical item.
Do you envision a world where one day there might be an ISO standard for digitalization?
Sorry, what's your question?
Can you imagine a world where one day, like with the ISO, right?
ISO, yeah.
Something like that would exist for digitalization. So a factory that wants to say we are fully digitalized, right? Like a fashion company that wants to say we're fully digitalized. There's a kind of governing or standardization body that'll look into it and say, yeah, okay, fine.
I love to have fashion with that, but I think I take one problem at a time. Right now, I think I'm focused more on the human part. But once I uncover that, I will work on the fashion side as well.
So that is one of
my ambition as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So Reblika also deals with the film and with tech companies. You state that these are the three areas, the three pillars, right? Fashion, film, and tech. Maybe there's more, right? You've explained what you did in the past in the film industry. What is Reblika's role in the film industry?
We're not doing a lot of film, but we're more in the tech these days, I have to say. In the tech, I recently also started a new company called Reblika, which is a software company that helps people to create their own avatar in a more democratic way. Because currently, when we are talking about avatar creation, as I told you, it takes months and months of work, right? And if I can make that process into like a day or 5 minutes job, how would that change the world? So that is what Reblika is about.
Mao, do you know how it might change the world? If Reblika goes commercial goes everywhere in the world, and everyone can create an avatar of themselves, change the avatar, be whoever they want to be. Have you ever envisioned how that might change the world, what its impacts could be?
I can imagine a little bit because right now if I look at LinkedIn, they banned some of the profile picture that are cartoon because they doesn't represent yourself because they want people to be validated, and that is just like in Twitter, you want to validate accounts, and right now their law these are not accepted. But imagine if we can create an avatar system that looks like you 100%, and they can use this to video calls, to Zoom calls, and for example when you wake up one day, you don't feel like dressing up, you can use your avatar to do the talking, but then showing the face of yourself being in the suit. So these are the applications I can imagine tomorrow.
So in that scenario you just mentioned, right? Great. I've been there many times. I can tell you that much. I love it. But does that mean that I'm about to enter a conference call, right? And I just select the clothes I want to wear for that call, right? And my avatar takes over, but I'm in the call, meaning I'm present, I'm listening, I'm responding, but the avatar is moving, its
just
lips
like
are
yourself,
moving.
just copy your movements, like how you putting your arms on down when you're talking, or how you look at people. It mimic all this behavior, but you don't have to sit. You can even lie down. It just pick up your voice, your emotion, everything that you want to do, but the shell is just like you.
How far away are you from that?
I'm working on that. Hopefully next year we can do something like that.
So that's live, isn't it? Then
Yeah, I plan to announce a demo in this year, so people can try out our software, which is not having all the features I just described, but it's a early version. But this is my first attempt to create a product like that.
So this means that I do this. Does it mean actually that if I move my arm this way, my avatar does?
So I can envision there's two modes. So one is like copy me, like what I'm doing right now, just represent me in a better way, or just a passive mode where you can just lay down on your bed and talk, and then the avatar just do something like move your hands, this non-verbal communication, how I move my hand, move my head. That should be done automatically, like autopilot.
Autopilot. So would autopilot have infinite possibilities, or will autopilot be a kind of standard number of movements that eventually...
I think the mood of the person determine the movement. For example,
the mood of the person.
Yes, if you want to be very strict business, so you probably don't move too much. We sit up straight. You want to be not slouching like me, and then you talk in a very calm voice. But at the same time, if you want to be more excited and more communicative, you can move more your hand, you can move more your heads. These are the parameters or instruction you can give at any moment to the avatar.
So mood, right? The mood of the person, right? So in my mind, automatically I have two mood modes, right? Two ways I can imagine initiating mood, right? One is you select the mood you are in the moment for the activity, right? So I'm about to enter a meeting with my accountant. My mood is depressed, for example, right? And then there's a set of movements or depression. That's one thing. But the second thing is based on my tone of voice, the volume of voice, somehow there's an intelligence that's picking up how I feel, and then it generates moves reflecting that. So which is it now?
I think both is possible. I think both through voice, we can detect your voice, your hormone level. No, I'm saying that we can do that yet, but I can imagine.
It's possible, right?
I think it's possible. Imagine if you can really accurately, but maybe you can also lie, pretend you be someone else.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of mood. Basically, I think there should be like a slider, like happy, sad, business, or or depressed, and then you basically during the conversation you can use your voice, but also your slider to control. Or if you're just lazy, autopilot, just pick up my voice and communicate.
So in your perfect world, right? How would this functionality operate?
Well,
because one feels like control is in your hands. You can manipulate, by altering the mood and altering, with sliders, etc. and the other kind of feels like a representation of you as you live. You know what I mean? So as I am, so will my avatar be, right? Do you have a preference for the two, or do you see a role for both?
Yeah, I always think people should have options and have both
Control in their hands.
Yeah, I think that's why I never want to restrict anything to the user. They should decide for themselves. And of course, I might see it coming. Your next question will be, what are the bad side of using something like this? Because that automatically
I think
translates.
we've got Black Mirror for that.
Then we talk about Black Mirror, talk about the deepfake video that we've seen on the internet. People try to create fake speech. And of course, that's with every new technology. People start to exploit it.
Yeah.
You know? So I cannot, that should not stop us from innovation.
So I want to make an argument for your philosophy, right? Which is one day, if we have true sovereignty over our identities in the real world and in the virtual world, right? If we have true sovereignty, but that sovereignty comes after you've met a certain criteria and standard, let's say it's a combination of digital plus biometric, whatever it could be, right? I think that's the only way we can combat things like deepfakes, etc.
Yeah.
Because there might be a possibility to not see a blue tick box when it's an account that's a deep fake.
Yeah.
You know?
We need verification. We need some kind of like check that allows to verify this is a trustworthy person.
Yeah. I want to know one more thing about Reblika, which is the name Reblika itself, right? Can you tell me how the name came about? Because it's not replica, but it's Reblika, right?
Yes.
When I heard it, I kind of thought of the word rebel and then replica as well.
So sorry that I changed my topic, because Reblika was at the time that I started my first startup.
Yeah.
And there was indeed, the hint was kind of like to the replicants from Blade Runner.
Yeah.
That's kind of my first thought, because I'm a big sci-fi fan. To add a bit, and I like the word Leica from the studio called Leica, and also the brand. So I mixed the two words together, so that's how I get Reblika. But then a lot of people ask me, and I also cannot pronounce my new startup called Reblium. And a lot of people saying rebellion, but that is exactly what it is. So Reblium is the Latin word for rebellion. And we are rebelling against the established order, how we see things in the digital world. So can I say we're against what, that's the story behind it.
What's the established order in the digital world?
For me, that is Facebook and the big corporate company that's not using our data in the right way. And I think they try to pivot right now into them changing the name into Meta and try to distract us from what happened in the past. But I think I would not trust my data in their hands. Yeah. And we are kind of the opposite of that. So that's why we call ourselves Rebellion or Reblium.
So my feeling, again, as a user of Facebook, right, and Instagram and all of these, is that when I heard the news of the name change, and I recently I heard an interview of Mark Zuckerberg, a long format interview of over 2 hours, I think it was, in which he was talking a lot about the metaverse, right? And at the end, what I kind of felt from that is they've done the data grab in Web 2, and now they're looking at doing the data grab in Web 3. That's the feeling I got, right? So for me at least, and that's personal, I wasn't converted into someone who believes that they're born again as a company and they've seen the flaw of their ways. It kind of feels they see a new opportunity and they want to get in there early.
Of course, I cannot blame Mark, because he's also under investors and a lot of pressure, to create a profitable company. But, if profit is your main drive at the beginning and to grow, that's probably not a good start to create trust for people. And I want to start with showing that I care about these things.
So Mao, this is, I think, very critical, especially for anyone who's thinking of building a business, right? Especially for young people who are also very much in sync with technology, far more than my generation, for example, right? I really want to dive into this idea of how, because investment money represents a certain kind of liberty and freedom as well, to develop the things that you want to develop, right? To hire the kind of minds that you want in your ecosystem to make these dreams come true.
Mm-hmm.
You need capital for that,
Absolutely.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hearing from what I just heard from you, at least, it feels to me that you have a clear idea of the right kind of capital and the wrong kind of capital.
Yes.
Am I wrong in saying that?
No, absolutely, you're right. I think we don't accept just money from anyone. Though we're not in a luxury position now that we have a lot of money to spend. But I rather take more time and find the right investor than hurry now and take money from someone that I don't really believe this is in helping me move to the next phase in terms of my vision and my dream of creating this white mirror. I think that's something I'm a bit stubborn, but that's how I am. I don't think this is a good idea to take money from anywhere from the world. Yeah.
So for the potential investors listening to this, right? I'm fascinated to know what would be the personality makeup, the values makeup of the right investor.
So first, one thing that also we embrace in our company is the diversity and inclusion. So for example, my company, we want at least 50-50 male and female ratio but also we currently have more than 17 country in the world working from people from South America, from Ukraine, from Asia to everywhere in the world. So I do prefer to have strategic investor that are already investing in NGOs and good things and make people happy, but also about empowering more women to enter this field. Because I think one of the problems I heard in Web3 is that there's not a lot of women in this world working in this field. And so I start to look more into female co-founders as well in my neighborhood.
There has been a lot of research and data on this, right? I mean, I think one of the Scandinavian countries, maybe it's Norway or Finland, they ran this experiment and it's run long enough. I think it's over 10 years old now, of attracting women to STEM fields, for example, that are traditionally mostly men, right? Yeah, and in the experimental labs, and these were national labs. I think it was Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. They discovered that after a period of time, right, women tended to gravitate back to occupations that were more related to human beings. Hence, teaching, the medical profession, etc., were where women naturally ended up gravitating to, right? And so the question is, you mentioned 50-50 male, female, right? What if you're not attracting the numbers of talent to maintain that ratio?
What will happen?
Yeah, I mean, how would you deal with it as a business owner? Because there's a discussion about merit. If someone really fits the job you're looking for, right, does it matter what sex they are?
I mean, in the beginning, we didn't look into that, and we just run the business as it goes, and but then the more female we hire, we found the decision making level. It's completely changed our landscape. So we start to also attract different people that I never could reach. So there's a lot of pros of hiring female decision makers, because they can really help me reaching out to a wider audience than if we have a more male dominant culture that's all about power or other ideas about how to run a business. And I think just like the Chinese, it's all about yin and yang. It's about balancing a company. You cannot be too yin or too yang. I think something in the middle, it's the best.
That's true, and I think sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, when because sometimes the business just develops a momentum of its own, right? And you kind of feel like you're on a ride, like on a roller coaster, and it's off, right? And you have no control anymore. You just want to hold on, and it can feel that way. And I kind of feel when I was looking at your company, etc., the space you're in, right? It kind of feels like it's still, when the roller coaster is moving up and it's slow, and it's gonna hit that apex, and then it's gonna start. It's gonna start, and I think having these thoughts at this stage is very helpful, because you're already developing your values and philosophy as a company.
Exactly. Right? I didn't have, to be honest, when I started a company, I didn't have those values and incorporate in my culture. But right now, I really value everything that we have, and we work strongly on to preserve that value across our every decision making. and also hiring. And I'm really happy for that. I really changed me.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. Well, and you have you're married and you have two daughters, so there's a lot of female influence in your life, and you see the value of that in many perspectives, right?
Yeah, I mean, back then I was my house was like black and white, typical man, like we don't like colors. But right now it has the whole spectrum of colors, and I don't feel alienated anymore. I feel really at home.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, so it does change me and make me more approachable and warm person, and that's the person I would like to be tomorrow. I don't want to make this.
It reminds me of that sectarian philosophy of you don't know what you don't know, right? And sometimes you think having black and white, because I'm a guy, I feel really cool, and it feels. But you don't know what you don't know, and until you are open to that idea, it can make amazing surprises.
Yeah, but life is all about experience, and I think I would just like to try out as many possible experiences as possible while I'm still alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Life is short. So.
And it is. And speaking of life that's short, etc., I think it's very interesting that we all, again, going back to the example, I'm a man. This is how a man lives. This is how a man sets up his apartment. Right? We have these labels we put on ourselves, right? Yeah. Maybe it's because we want to fit, and somehow structure of society requires labels, so you have clear identity. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about identity because in the course of this conversation, right, we've discovered that there is Kitan, the artist, right? Mm-hmm. There's Mao, the tech entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And then there's another persona, another version of you that feels like the rebel, the one who's creating a rebellion against the established structures, right? That you feel are flawed, right? How much of the singular Mao is the artist, the tech entrepreneur, and the rebel? How do I divide the single being based on these various traits?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I have never thought about that. I have so many alter egos, but it's a good moment to think about that. I think, as I said, I change my career every 5 years, and that also involved in changing, creating this alter ego, because it requires truly a different mindset and different person to be that. I cannot be the same person like 5 years ago, because I would not be able to run the company as I am today. So I've been just like those personality I create this multiverse around me of personality that can fit into the right moment, and that's something I become pretty good at, because I have this natural thing called HDD.
Yeah. What does HDD stand for?
I think ADD.
ADD.
Yeah.
That's a deficiency.
Attention
deficiency disorder. Yeah.
So that's something I think I recently found out that's actually my superpower. So I can actually multitask between 100 things, but at the same time I can focus on one thing at a time if I want.
So when you're focusing, you can give it.
Yeah, I can be really focused. But the problem is that with people with ADD is they cannot listen to a professor talking for 10 minutes, because I will be distracting already in my mind. I'm already thinking about 10 different things. That's also maybe something you discover while you talk to me. I can jump from one topic to another without any problem. I think that's also shaped a bit how I am. I can have multiple personas stored in my mind, and I can just access them instantly whenever I need to.
Sidebar, because something you said now is very interesting, right? Mm-hmm. As someone who has ADD, you've identified a flaw in traditional educational structures, right? Systems, how they teach, right? Mm-hmm. A lecture of 1 hour doesn't work for someone with ADD, right?
Exactly.
Do you see some of what you're doing having potential applications in education, for example? How we learn, how information is transferred?
Well, I couldn't see the relevance of studying business when I was young. But imagine if I can see what I about to do today. I would love to learn more about business. But at that time, it didn't occur to me that I have the possibility of doing something like this. So yes, they fail to capture my attention because they are too much focusing on creating this 9-to-5 job mentality. While I think in the future, including my children, it's all more about problem solving. I think if you can present a problem and the kids have to solve it, then you get my attention. I think that's how I see, and hopefully education will become more problem-solving courses than really like just teaching something that everyone should do the same thing.
And might your technologies have a role in that new way of teaching?
Yeah, maybe it's just showing what people can do with themselves, showing the possibility, how they. Because I think a lot of problem in this world is also with including my own children. They don't know what they want to be. They don't have really an idea what they want to become. So they waste a lot of times figuring that out, and then before they know, they are 30 or 40. So what's good about me, because I dare to fail. I try out different things. That's why I'm saying I keep doing new things, because I got to see a lot of different potential of myself, and sometimes I fail miserably. But this really opens up my mind. And that means that I can do more things in a shorter time, because I know what I want, and I don't mind to fail.
You don't mind failing. You have failed before. Maybe that's a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of people really are terrified of failure,
Yeah.
because they think it'll be a label they carry all their lives, right?
Exactly.
But you've experienced that, so
Yeah.
you live beyond a failure.
I didn't finish my school even. I'm a dropout, and my mom was terrified at the idea that I was quitting my school. But look what happened to me. So I realize that as an artist, I don't need a paper, a diploma. Maybe for all people like doctors, you need that. I'm not arguing that. But for an artist, you don't need a paper. So for me, I discovered this very early. I said, okay, let's start working.
Okay, this is really interesting, because so that goes back to my first question. Mm-hmm. Speaking of ADD, let's switch back to that, right? So there was Kitan, the artist, right, who became a tech entrepreneur, right? Mm-hmm. And when I see your company today, I see the artist in that company still. I see what you did as an artist now being applied in the company. So I do see it there, right? Mm-hmm. And I see the combination of the artist in you and the technologist in you coming together, which could be how the rebellion can succeed, right? And I see the lines that connect all of these. And now I have to think of something the poet Charles Bukowski said, right? He said, find your passion and let it kill you. And it ties into this idea that, discover what you're passionate about and give it your all, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But very often you've heard the stories of artists who've died penniless, right? And after they die, their art is celebrated and it's sold for hundreds of millions, but in their lifetime, they never experience success from it. You are an artist who's also created a business, right, etc.
That's a good one.
What advice would you give other people who are at that phase that you were at one point, which is I'm an artist, I want to express myself through my art?
That's a very good question, because at a certain point I said Alex went viral and people pick up, and I got an opportunity to go to Dubai, and normally it's people think, why are you going there? But actually, I took the challenge, as I said, because I want to do something new completely every couple of years. And that also give me the luxury to try out something new, manage people. So if you have to go back to your... and that's how I actually get all the knowledge, how to run a business and how to manage my team. But if I didn't took that challenge that was presented to me at that moment, and I stay as an artist, which I can still be successful, but I feel like being an artist is not a challenge anymore. And I always want to be challenged. And that's my advice to people. Take any challenge that you can across your path, and don't be shy about that, because it doesn't make sense at that moment, but it will make sense later down the line.
That's very nice. That's very, very nice. I want to wrap this up with Black Mirror again. Since one of your objectives is to create the white mirror, right? Which I find really interesting. So there's one episode of Black Mirror that I especially love. It's called Be Right Back. So in this episode, a young woman's boyfriend gets killed in a car accident. And as she's mourning his death, she discovers a technology that allows her to communicate with an artificial intelligence. And eventually in the episode, it begins with the AI represented through voice. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes video. And then eventually a cybernetic organism shows up.
Teddy bear, right? Or is it?
No. This was a real human being. No, the teddy bear thing, I think, was the episode with that singer, Miley Cyrus. Yeah. But this was a first season of Black Mirror. Mm-hmm. So a guy gets killed. His wife is devastated from the loss of this person that she shared a life with. And suddenly, through what we discussed earlier, X number of hours of recording of voice and video, etc., she gets to talk to him.
I remember that one.
And then she gets to, have video calls with him. Yeah. And then one day there's an option to upgrade.
Upgrade, yeah.
And and then he shows up, right?
Yeah.
What's the white mirror version of that?
Wow, you asked me a really hard question,
Because, I'll tell you why I'm asking, Mao. Because I see what you're doing now already being kind of like the first steps towards making that upgraded version a possibility, right? Because you're creating textures, you're creating imperfections that make that cross the uncanny valley become so real, right? Yeah. But it's still existing on a screen.
Yeah.
I know you're fully aware that one day you can take it off screen, right? You can.
Oh, that's why I choose to do it on the screen, because that's more, not accessible, but more realistic, doable than solving a problem, creating like a robot. I don't think we're there yet. Maybe it takes maybe more than my lifetime to make it perfect, like the one you see in Bicentennial Man. I think that's also one of my favorite movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe I try to avoid the question, but because I really don't have answer for that at the moment. So.
Yeah. But you are thinking about.
I'm thinking about that. But it's a good topic to think about tonight, or way back home.
I would love to have a part 2 of this where we discuss how much of the white mirror you've been involved in. I think Sweetie is a great example of the white mirror, in my opinion. And
I don't think we should let the negative things overshadow the good things that we can create. So, so let's wait, see how things are going, and then maybe in part 2 I can tell you more.
Excellent. Mao, thank you so much for giving me your time. It's been a pleasure, sir.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. It's mine.
Thank you.